Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in our series of preparation classes for our Course Companions membership site. Today, we are here to talk about why the text is central. And I'm here today with Greg Mackie, who many of you recognize as one of the main teachers at the Circle, and Marianne Buchowski. And Marianne is the head of the Teacher-Pupil Initiative for the Circle of Atonement. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Emily Bennington, and I'm also with the Circle, and I am pleased to be here with you all. Before I introduce our presenter today, Mr. Robert Perry, I want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So Robert will be speaking for about 40 to 45 minutes, and if you have questions in the middle of his presentation, I'm going to take them at the end. So what I would ask that you do is to enter your questions in the chat, and I will collect them and feed them to Robert about 10 or 15 minutes before the top of the hour. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Robert Perry, the editor of the Complete and Annotated Edition of A Course in Miracles, and also the head teacher for our Course Companions membership site. Robert, I will turn the floor over to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, this is our very first class in Course Companions, and what we decided to do is have a series of 5 introductory classes to get us ready for the study of the text. That's what we're starting in September, and so it just seemed fitting to talk about why the text is so important, to talk about how the text is structured, and to talk about how to approach the reading of the text, which we'll be doing in the later classes, just because the text can be so difficult. So what I want to do in this first class, as Emily said, is just talk about why the text is so extremely important when it comes to A Course in Miracles. As course students, I think a lot of us, even though many of us love the text, a lot of us avoid the text. It is hard going. It's easy to go through a whole section and get to the end and think, what did I just read? Many of us prefer the workbook or the manual. I know that myself, I think historically, I've probably on balance preferred the workbook over the years. I know there are students who, there were even teachers I heard who their big focus was part 2 of the workbook, which they called the playbook. So they sort of hung out in half of another volume other than the text. But the text is obviously the longest volume of the course, and it is the main one. I know when I've said that in the past, I've had questions from people, but it really is. If you take an educational course and you're given a text, and then you're given a workbook, and you're given a teacher's manual, what would you consider the main book, the main volume out of those 3? I think we'd all consider the text to be. And it's the same with the course. Basically, the text sets forth the teaching. And the other 2 volumes are there to take the ideas that were presented in the text and to basically bring them further into our lives in different ways. The workbook in terms of practicing them internally, the manual in terms of extending them to other people, but both those other volumes are taking the text subject matter and simply applying it, extending it, bringing it further into our lives. Okay. Now, I found it very interesting recently. The Foundation for Inner Peace, they published an interview that they unearthed that Helen had done on audio tape. And I wanted to read you a little snippet of it because I thought it was very telling. She says, "But I didn't know when it was finished, and I didn't know when it was supposed to stop in terms of taking down the course." She said, "The course came first." Then she said, "The text, what we had originally called the course, the text is the right word, that came first." In other words, even though this was after the whole thing had come through, somewhere in the back of her mind, she still thought of the text as the course. And I think that's kind of telling. So what I would say is, if you're a Course in Miracles student, there's nothing more basic than reading and studying the text. If you're alienated from the text, if you're out of touch with it, if you kind of tend to avoid it, then you're really missing the basic volume. I wanted to share my screen here. I've got a few PowerPoint slides that I'll be kind of popping into here and there. Okay, so I often make lists, and they're always a little bit different because it's ultimately a long list. Lists of things that you would know little or even nothing about without the text. Okay, miracles. Most all of the miracle discussions and references to miracles are in the text, the vast majority. Miracles are referred to throughout, but not discussed at length as they are in the text. The holy instant, barely referred to outside the text. Special relationships. I don't think there's a single reference to special relationships outside the text. Holy relationships. There are maybe a few references to holy relationships in the manual for teachers, but almost every single bit of that discussion is in the text. The role of guilt, that's concentrated in the text. The discussion of idols, things outside of us that we think can save us, that's a text discussion. Projection, that's almost all text. Think about what a basic concept that is for the Course. The special function, that's almost all text. And the list, like I said, could be longer. Okay, so I'll stop my screen share here. Oh wait, I'll go on the next slide, I think. Okay, so why is the text so central? And I said a little bit about that, but it's because for the Course, the ideas are everything. Yes, the Course is really into spiritual practice, even meditation. The Course is really into extending to our brothers. But what we're doing when we're doing the inner practice is we are practicing the ideas. What we're extending to our brothers when we're doing that is, again, it's the ideas. It's not that you are preaching the ideas to them, but those ideas are in your mind, hopefully as a presence of love, because love is an idea. And so you're extending that in your behavior. This is a quote that I've long loved from the text about the importance of the ideas. So I want to go ahead and read this. It says, "This is the year for the application of the ideas that have been given you. For the ideas are mighty forces." What a great line. The ideas are mighty forces to be used and not held idly by. They have already proved their power sufficiently for you to place their faith in them and not in their denial. This year, invest in truth and let it work in peace. You see a lot here in this quote about how the author, who I believe is Jesus, how he sees the ideas he's presenting in the text. As I said, he sees them as mighty forces. And as mighty forces, they're supposed to do work. Notice that last line, let it work in peace. They're supposed to bring about results in your life, which they can only do if you use them. Okay, so from the Course's standpoint, its ideas are not this kind of impractical head trip where we're just trying to learn things that so we can show off, to our Course friends. They are what saves us if we understand them and then if we use them. And I think, for all of the sort of, bad rep that ideas can get in spiritual circles, I think we've all experienced this, where you come upon a certain idea, either it's a new idea or it hits you in a new way, it's something maybe you haven't noticed before, and it causes something big to happen in you. I enjoy reading people's spiritual experiences. There's actually a university in Wales that collects accounts of spiritual experiences. And what's interesting is that sometimes, I think, fairly often, people's experiences, the catalyst for the experience is words or ideas. So we often think of ideas as somehow antithetical to experience, get out of your head and into your heart. But the reality in our lives is that ideas are experiential. They cause experience. Okay, and we see a similar passage in the beginning of the workbook. This is a familiar and beloved passage. He says some of the ideas, and he's talking about the workbook ideas that you'll practice, you will find difficult to believe, and others will seem quite startling. It does not matter. You are merely asked to apply them as you are directed to do. You are not asked to judge them or even to believe them. You are merely asked to use them. It is their use that will give them meaning to you and show you they are true. So we do end up believing them. If you've been shown an idea is true, you believe it. It's just that what he's saying is you don't have to believe them before you practice them. The practicing will show you they're true and give you the belief in them. And here you see really the same essence that we saw in that previous passage, because the ideas are portrayed as very powerful, right? He doesn't say that, but that's implied here, right? And to experience that power, you have to use them. Both passages say use the ideas. Okay. Let's see here. Now I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna stop my screen share actually. Okay. Okay, we have Emily as the speaker. I guess I'll go out of speaker view then. Gallery view. Anyway, a lot of what I'm trying to counteract here is just this really prevalent idea that ideas are somehow this empty intellectual thing that we collect just to kind of show off, as I said, or that they're there for a certain kind of intellectual entertainment. We're used to ideas that are entertaining, something, more or less tasty and crunchy we can intellectually munch on. But in the Course, its ideas are portrayed as the stuff of salvation. If we can learn the ideas first intellectually, practice the ideas, and extend the ideas, then we come to fully believe in those ideas, and then we're done. We're saved. Our spiritual development is complete, and we are out of this dream. So the ideas in the Course are granted this huge importance, and that's partly because the Course ultimately focuses on different kinds of ideas, you could say, than we usually do. And you see this in the discussion of reincarnation in the teacher's manual, where basically, I'll go ahead and read you a passage from that. This is from section 24 of the manual, paragraph 4. He says, it cannot be too strongly emphasized that this Course aims at a complete reversal of thought. When this is finally accomplished, issues such as the validity of reincarnation become meaningless. Until then, they are likely to be merely controversial. The teacher of God, the Course teacher, is therefore wise to step away from all such questions, for he has much to teach and learn apart from them. He should both learn and teach that theoretical issues but waste time, draining it away from its appointed purpose. Now, when he's speaking about theoretical issues there, he doesn't mean the Course's theory, because the Course says that the theory in the text is the basis for the practical exercises in the workbook. He's talking about the kind of theory you'd associate with ideas like reincarnation. So notice Reincarnation is an idea that for years I thought of as one of the basic pillars of spiritual truth. And here he's saying that it's ultimately meaningless. Along the way, it's going to be merely controversial. We should step away from it and issues like it. And it just wastes time. Isn't that interesting? So from his standpoint, the ideas he's teaching us are not the kind of empty intellectual head trips that we often associate with ideas. He's saying, yes, those ideas do exist, but they aren't part of this course. The ideas I'm teaching you are the very stuff of salvation. And they promise to completely transform you on the inside and on the outside. Transform how you live. Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen again. And, while I'm talking, I should just say, Greg, Marianne, please feel free to throw in something if it strikes you as appropriate. Oftentimes I'll, miss out some key point, and, it's nice to see it when it's thrown in. Okay. Okay, so as I was thinking about what to say today, I thought in terms of 3 problems that the text solves with its teachings. Really basic problems. So I want to go through those. Problem number 1, we are not aware of just how loveless our current thought system is. A lot of what the text does is it's there to unmask the thought system that's actually driving us in our lives. The thought system through which we are seeing the world, which is causing our emotions, which is prompting our behavior. What we've done is we've covered it over with this nice disguise, as sort of a smiling mask, and we fooled ourselves. To some degree, we fooled other people, although, the longer we know somebody, I think the less we fool them. And so what the text is doing so much of the time is unmasking the thought system that we're actually living by. And there's a great quote that I thought of in this connection that I'll go ahead and read here. It's talking about special relationships. And in special relationships, the glue that knits them together is that we're each sacrificing for each other. We call it giving, but it's, I give, and as I give, I do feel a certain sense of loss, but I know that you'll be giving back. So it's okay, and it all works, and it's wonderful. And there's a great section that we've titled in our new edition, The Basis of the Holy Relationship, that just unmasks that mode that we think of as a giving mode. And here's a passage from that section. For each one thinks that he has sacrificed something to the other and hates him for it. So I gave to you, but I really wish I could have gotten from you what I wanted without having to give and sacrifice and thereby lose something. So I think I've sacrificed something to you, and I secretly hate you for it. Yet this is what he thinks he wants. He is not in love with the other at all. He merely believes he is in love with sacrifice. And for this sacrifice, which he demanded of himself, he demands the other accept the guilt and sacrifice himself as well. And this is part of a whole discussion in which he's saying that basically the point of the sacrifices is to make the other person feel guilty. Because in their guilt, they will feel obligated to sacrifice themselves for us in return. And when it's put that way, and basically what he says is that, what brings guilt is not love. It must be anger if it brings guilt. So in those gifts, there is hidden anger that induces guilt and then prompts the return sacrifice, and we keep giving and it's all wonderful. But when he unmasks the thought system like he does in that section, which is brilliantly done, you have a completely different perspective on those relationships. You can't see them in the same way again. You become a little bit more aware of just how loveless the thought system that you're currently acting out is. Okay, really powerful function the text performs. Problem number 2, we're not aware of how unjustified and painful our thought system is. Now, while we're hiding that thought system underneath the smiling mask and are not aware of it ourselves, we're hanging on to it because we think it's justified and we think it brings happiness, or at least promises to bring happiness one day. Okay? And so what the text is constantly doing is showing us that this loveless thought system is not really justified. It shows us a picture of reality in which it actually is not justified. It's completely senseless. And it also is constantly showing us that it inevitably brings pain. It promises happiness, it promises salvation of a sort, but it's actually going to always bring pain. So the pain is not, oh, it didn't work this time. The pain is, it did work. It's designed to do that. And when you're taught that something is not justified and actually brings you pain, inevitably, that changes your perspective on that thing. So for instance, if somebody says, let's say you're playing the lottery every week, and someone says, you know what, it's been unearthed conclusively that people who have your last name are not allowed to win the lottery ever. It will never happen. If you believe that, you wouldn't keep playing, right? That change in perspective holds within it a huge change within us. If we believe that, for instance, anger, or in the case of our previous point, giving to get, if we believe those things are baseless and inevitably painful, we will stop doing them. Okay. Problem number 3, in our current thought system, love, what the Course calls love, real love, is usually not justified. If you think about it, this is what we're struggling with like every day. We feel like we ought to love the people in our lives fully, right? Unconditionally. We feel like, we ought to maintain a loving, forgiving stance, even when, they've treated us poorly. And yet we're always straining to do this, aren't we? We strain to love those people, at least most of them, because it doesn't seem like they really deserve it, like it's really justified. And in our current thought system, it's not. Right? They've been going around hurting people, and for selfish reasons, basically. So why would we love them? In our current worldview, love doesn't make very much sense. It makes very isolated, fleeting bits of sense. And so one of the main purposes of the text is to guide us into a worldview, as I say here, in which unconditional love is always fully justified. And this is my issue with spiritual paths, and there are a lot of them out there that are really simple. Like here's point 1, 2, 3, 4, and it just ends up being like, just don't judge, right? The problem with that is that in our current worldview, judgment is justified. People deserve our condemnation. Okay? We need a picture of reality that supports a different emotional response. And that's what the text does. It builds this completely, radically different picture of what reality is. And only in that picture is unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness always fully justified. Until you learn that picture, they aren't always fully justified. They're far from that. So a huge purpose of the text is the text makes love make sense. a sense it does not make without the text. So, the text teaches us a different view of who people are, a different view of who we are. In its view, other people are actually not human beings. They're divine beings who are dreaming that they are these, body-bound egos. And we are not vulnerable. We can't actually be injured by other people or by anything. We too are these divine beings who are merely dreaming that we're these human beings. That's just a little snippet of what the text always does. It just builds this whole picture of reality in which the kinds of emotional responses we've always wanted to have suddenly make sense. Okay, so that pretty much concludes what I wanted to say specifically about the text. I wanted to talk a little bit about just the experience of going through the text, a little bit about what the text means for me in my life. And I wanted to just also get some sharing mainly from some of our teachers in the circle about what the text means in their lives. Because the thing is that the text, as I've said, it's work. And I've been reading it for 30 some years now, and it's still work. And so if you're going to do the work, and we're about to embark on a year of doing that work, it helps to have people say, that work has been worth it for me. It just helps us. So, to ease into that, one thing I'll say is that when we were going through the text in the 90s in Sedona, Arizona, one of our students there who became a wonderful teacher, John Perry, he just would say every now and then that there is nothing like going through the text. And he said, he was a big workbook guy, John Perry was. He said, people consider the workbook experiential. I consider the workbook experiential. But what he would say was the text is experiential. And his experience of taking groups through it was that there was nothing like that experience for the group and for the people involved. Going through the text changes you. It does. Every day is some new idea. One of my big beefs, actually, just to go on a bit of a tangent here, one of my beefs is that people think that the course just repeats itself over and over again. So it's kind of like the same thing in every section. And I've been doing commentary now on the text every day this year. So I'm up to 237, I think, today. And I'm doing little summaries of each section. And none of those section summaries look like any other section. They're all completely unique. And so as I read each section, getting into my own experience here, as I read each section, I'm taking in something that I haven't encountered yet in the text, and it changes my outlook on some subject matter, some topic like relationships or anger or whatever. And as it goes in, things shift around inside, and I feel different. I may not have fully come anywhere near realizing that idea, but still things do shift around inside. I do feel different, and I do have now a tool through which I can approach situations in my life differently. So for me, reading the text each morning is like a spiritual food. It's not just, what I love is I don't really like, I am intellectually oriented, but I don't really like acquiring ideas that won't do me any good. I want ideas that are practical, that can help me be, in the end, more loving, more peaceful, more helpful, more secure. I want those ideas. And when I read the text, it gives me those ideas in a way that nothing else has ever done. And it's not enough to just know the ideas from memory. or to have heard them in your study group. There is a way in which the author is giving us these ideas with eloquence, with kind of ironic wit, with a brilliance of expression, with beauty of expression, with conviction and certainty and power. He has a way to talk us into those ideas that is very different than I know them from memory, or I heard them in my study group, or even I read them yesterday. I've read some of these sections, I can't count how many times, and they feel each day to some significant degree new. Every day. So there is something the text gives me that is like spiritual food that I find irreplaceable. So I just wanted to open, I did send an email out to our teachers before the class, and I wanted to open it up to, I know Marianne, you said that you wanted to share some before we do our Q&A time. Did you want to go ahead and share now, Marianne?
Well, actually, Robert?
Yeah.
Let me share, because there seems to be a slight break in the hammering that's been
okay.
And I apologize. I haven't been participating here precisely because the hammering has been relentless, and it started right when the class started, just on cue. So I just wanted to say, so yeah, I apologize. I haven't been able to talk about, give my biography like we did at the beginning there, because it was the hammering is just too relentless. But anyway, in terms of studying the text, I love studying the text, and it has been life-changing for me too. And I want to expand more on that point that you made in your last slide, which is that the text makes love makes sense. I think that I didn't word it exactly right, but it makes love into a sensible option. And that really struck me, the way you talked about that, because that's the way I see things too. Because one thing that I've really noticed is that everybody says we ought to love. All you need is love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Everybody believes that. In terms of what they profess, or most people do, I should say. And yet we don't. We do to a point, but the world is still full of hate and fear and anger and all this stuff like that. And I've always been struck by that. Gosh, if everybody believes that, why doesn't it happen? And I think it doesn't happen for exactly the reason you say, Robert, when you're talking about that slide, that in this world with the current thought system that we carry around, normally love isn't really justified. And so we say, well, I want to love. Yeah, what we need is love. Maybe someday we'll love. But right now, we're going to get squashed if we do that. And that's kind of the way things turn. I'm into activist kinds of things. Really kind of standing up for the marginalized and that such. And I saw this picture of this person at a rally, and she had a sign that said, we are not afraid. And I'm saying, great, that's a good message there. But then she had a T-shirt that said, punch more Nazis. And I'm like, no. But we live in a world that has a thought system that says punching Nazis is the way to love. That's what we do. But tying this in with why the text is so important to me is exactly what you said. Reading the text, letting it sink in, and all of its sophistication, as you say, it doesn't just repeat itself. All of its sophistication, all of its profundity, it basically gives this amazing justification for love. That's what it does, and it does from so many different angles and from so many different perspectives, and has so many different ways of convincing us, different techniques for convincing us. That by the time you get to the end of it, you do have an incredible justification for love. You still have to practice, and you still slip into justifications for attack, but it's there. And I think we need that, because again, we can all profess to believe in love all we want, but if we don't have a thought system that really supports it, it just doesn't happen. We're still trying to punch Nazis. That's just the way it goes. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. And mercifully, the hammer guy, whom I love, even though he's hammering, I have a justification to love him. that's what it's all about, and that's a big reason that the text has been a really profound thing for me.
All right, thank you. Okay. Marianne?
Okay, well, I don't think I can talk about the importance of the text for me without talking about Jesus specifically. When I first picked up the text way back, the course back then, way back when, I opened the book and I knew instantly that this was Jesus. And I really loved the Jesus that I was finding in the course, and I felt this was the Jesus that I knew but had been lost because of how he'd been presented over the millennia. And so he's always been really, really present to me as I read and I study the course, and I've always felt that these are his teachings. And what else would I want to learn in life but his teachings? What else would I want to practice in life but his teachings? Even though I'm not so good at it a lot of the time, that's really what I'm here for. And so I love his teachings, and I want to learn them as much as possible. And I really liked to reiterate what Greg said about your presentation about love. I mean, you've talked about the text a lot over the years, but the way you identified those three problems was really beautiful. And I think the biggest thing that the text has done for me, with me, is help me to learn to be more loving. And when I'm not loving, to really call me to attention for it. It doesn't let me off the hook. It's right there. This is what I'm teaching. How are you really internalizing my teachings? How are you getting what I'm saying here? And so I think that's really been big for me. It's only through really reading and studying and not trying to skip over things that I might find uncomfortable, not try to avoid the darkness inside me, but let him, bring it to the fore for me so that I can understand it and go beyond it. So I love that part of it. And I always felt that Jesus was talking through the course, through the text specifically. But with the CE, I've been feeling more and more that he's here talking with me. He really knows me. And this is what, all the examples, the missing material is really showing. He knows me intimately. He knows what I need. He knows what I need to learn and understand and to practice. And so I'm just feeling, even though I've had such a close relationship with him through the text, I'm feeling so much more of that with this CE. And so, I mentioned earlier that I'm taking a group of people through the CE text as practice this year. So we're getting our daily practice from it. And so because I'm practicing his lesson, his teachings, I'm paying more attention to what he's saying. So this year, after all these years, well, the past 2 years actually, because I've been doing this for 2 years, past couple of years, it's as if the teachings are sinking in more and more deeply for me. And it's because I'm giving my attention to them. I'm really taking them seriously, really want to learn them. And they have done a lot of transformation for me. They've been very transformative for me. And I just, I just know that it's sticking with them that's going to really bring more of that and bring me all the promises. So, yeah, so I absolutely love the readings. I love Jesus' presence. I love how, even though he knows me so clearly, he's very, as Greg often says, gentle and firm with me. He's not judging me, even though I'm judging myself for not being so faithful to his lessons and not investing in truth all the time. So yeah, so absolutely pivotal. That's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, now Kathy and Steve had volunteered. I'll see if they're still with us. Okay, I see Steve. Is Kathy there? Okay. So Kathy, I'm going to promote you to panelist here. See if this works. Okay. So, but then I guess we can only hear you. Yeah. Kathy, can we hear you?
He's muted.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll share. I think I'm going to echo a lot of what Greg and Marianne have already said, but I'll just dive right in. So when I found the course, found A Course in Miracles, I'd been searching for a number of years for a way to be just like Jesus. I have always felt drawn to being that loving and that giving, but never could really figure out how to do that. And so, as Marianne said, when I found the course, I realized this was him saying, "Follow me." And but I still struggled with wanting to be loving, because coming from this world's understanding, I was always falling back and being tricked into being conniving and manipulative in order to stay safe in this unforgiving and attacking world. And that I never would have understood that that's what I was doing without the text, without the course. And it's only by my really devoted and deep study, which gets deeper every year, of the course, that I realized what it was that I was doing to sabotage my wish to be just like Jesus. And so the text has taught me to look at myself and my way of being in the world in an honest and courageous way, which isn't really all that easy, but it's only through this discovery of what's lying beneath the surface of me, like what my wishes. It's only coming to that understanding that of what makes me the way I am, that I can use the practice that's in the workbook and also in the text to really be open to the transformation that allows me to understand and live as though love really is worth giving. And it's the only answer that's really justified, as Robert said in his presentation. So the text has been absolutely a lifeline for me, because there's always been in me this struggle of wanting to be loving and caring and giving, and yet this always falling back in fear and protection, because I see only an attacking world. So the text is helping me change my way of seeing everything in a way that's very transformational, that I would not and could not get just from doing the workbook over and over and over again, because I just didn't understand it. I think there has to be a lot of understanding that goes with the practice. The practice can do a lot, but it's just like, I always like to say, it's just like doing the rosary without thinking what it means. I need to have the meaning too, and that comes from studying the text. And like Marianne, I've been taking my lessons from the lectures in the text this last couple of years, and that has really changed the way I understand myself and the world, which is, again, a plug for that study. It's so valuable. And that's all for me.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Okay, let me get Steve here. And then after Steve, we'll do our Q&A. Okay. So, Steve, you with us? Steve, hello? Hello? Oh, there he is. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's a hard act to follow. What everyone has just said is fairly comprehensive. I spent a long time, I think it's 17 years reading the course, pretty much on my own. I'd go to the occasional conference, an occasional workshop, and get bits of what other people were saying that the course was saying. And I was getting some of it myself. I was definitely getting some of the text, but mostly I was left confused. That I could see, I never doubted it was the right path for me, and I never doubted that the truth was here, but I just couldn't get hold of it very easily. And then, as you all know, 5 years ago, I started with the Circle and did the text reading program that you're just about to start again.
And suddenly I was given the key. And gradually over the 5 years and over all the programs we've done and over the books we've read, particularly your book, Robert, I've been given the key to understand how to read the text, and found it even more the answer, even more the path, even more the thing I was seeking. And basically, in terms of personal journey, I was quite clear at the beginning. The problem was everybody else. That was clear to me. It was unequivocal, unquestionable, and I just couldn't quite know how to get them all to change, to be in a way that was more in harmony with the way I think things should be. And gradually over these years, I've had more of the course, or the text properly, has given me more and more reasons to realize it's not about them in terms of that changing them. It's about me understanding why I see it wrong, why the way I see it is causing my pain. And that still left me with a big question of, well, how to do it. And that's been a much more gradual answer, but again, helped through the circle, seeing that the how to is pretty much in every section. And I was completely missing it. That in every section of the text, there is, and I look for them now, that the sentence that says, so do this. and it's there, and I don't know how I missed it, but I certainly did miss it. Such that I feel challenged on a daily basis, because that temptation is there every day to think the problem's some other people, and if they just behave differently, I'll be all right. So there's that challenge every day to say, no, it's the way I'm looking at that situation. But that challenge comes with an awful lot of help. Just a considerable amount of just explaining how no real harm's been done, that the pain can be lifted if I let it. And I think the big thing I would say is that when I do the text, and particularly this last time we're going through it now, I feel that although there's clearly a structured program of me reading a section every day and thinking about it and practicing it, I also feel personally guided in a way that is beyond the book itself. That I feel events in my day are orchestrated to reinforce today's lesson. That things happen, thoughts occur to my mind. It's almost like I'm being coached by somebody who does exist. And of course, the main bulk of it is the text, the structures given by the text, but there's that personal coaching that is so aligned with it that makes things happen that are far beyond my ability to make happen, such that my life gets easier. And more importantly, I don't prolong my pain as much as I used to. So it becomes, although people can see it as this theoretical mass, I see it much more as a in-depth personal coaching. And I'm deeply grateful for that. With the help of the circle. Without that key, though, I'd still be wondering what's going on.
That's right. Don't forget that part.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Okay, so I don't know if you wanted to share anything, Emily, but for those who don't know, I mean, Emily's been pushing me for the whole year, saying we've got to take people through the text, and we've been going through the text together. So did you want to share anything?
The only thing that I would share would be to echo what everyone else has said. Robert, I loved your quote, not from the course, but I guess it's yours. The text makes love make sense. And the reason why I love that so much is because I think for those of us who, whether you're on a spiritual path or not, but particularly if you've been on a spiritual path for a while, you tend to think of yourself as quote unquote loving. And when you read the text, as you go through it, what you come to discover is how much less loving you actually are than you think you are. And also, importantly, how conditional the love that you do give is. And so going through the text is what allows us to look at those areas of our lives where we aren't being loving. And as Steve said, gives us practical ways to move forward and to echo what Kathy said, to move forward in alignment with how Jesus is. And I can't think of a better anchor for any of that than the text of A Course in Miracles. So thank you for that wonderful overview. So to move into the Q&A portion of this call, there's one question that we have so far, and it is from Linda. And her question is, she says, I have had course students tell me that they don't think that their minds are equipped to grasp the text. And so how can we assure fellow students that that they can grasp it and that the course has been given to them in perfect trust and confidence?
Well, I'll offer what I have to say about that, but is that the only question we have?
That's it, but I have a couple for you as well.
Okay. You know, one thing I think is that the course, it really asks of us, ideally, a broad spectrum of abilities and strengths if we're going to really, like, you know, be ideal students, you could say. I mean, it wants people who ultimately are, you know, have able minds, able intellects, but who also have strong wills and who also are good at connecting with people, and also who can transmit healing, you know, power to other people. All kinds of, who can connect with, who can hear the Holy Spirit, who can meditate well and experience God. It's like there's a whole complement of skills the course really wants from us, and no one has that full complement. So in terms of the intellectual ability that the text would ideally have us possess, I think that if that's not your strong suit and the course is still your path, then you'll be fine. Ideally, though, seek out help. You know, where we're weak, it's good for us to lean upon somebody who is stronger and can help us with that area, because the understanding, it's important. You know, what can we say? We can't get around that. And so I'm a big believer that when it comes to the text, we all could use some help.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I have two.
I want to see if Greg or Marianne wanted to add anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Greg or Marianne, do you have anything?
Yeah, I really don't have much to add, except just to kind of reiterate. I think one of the things you said, Robert, was that if the course is your path, you know, you have the equipment. I mean, and to reiterate one more thing you said, you know, you have help, and that's a part of what we're trying to do with Course Companions, is provide that very kind of help, so that you will be able to go through it, and whatever spots you're weak on can be strengthened with all these many mighty companions. So anyway, yeah, if the course is meant to be your path, you know, you have what you need.
And I wanted to just add two things, that one, that both of them of which Jesus says, and at one point he talks about this being our natural language. So this language that we've always known, it's within us, and so it's there to be understood. And the other thing which I just love is when he talks to Helen about the pseudo-retardation syndrome. And, you know, I think the ego does not, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'm very clear that the ego does not want me to get this course. He does not want me to learn these teachings, because he knows that it's going to change me completely and take me out of its grasp. And so I think the idea that I can't get this, I don't understand it. Also, I have to be aware that, am I saying this because of the pseudo-retardation syndrome? Am I somewhere inside me pretending that I really don't understand it, I don't have the ability, I can't get it, because of that, I want to play that role? And I mean, that's very, you know, 1960s language, so I don't, you know, that's not a language we use anymore. But just to be aware, am I using this as an excuse?
Right, because you do get it, and it scares you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Robert, I'd also like to ask you a question that I get a lot, which is, what are your thoughts on reading the text and the workbook at the same time?
Yeah, I think it can be done, but I think ideally you do one or the other at a given time, because to really give the text its due, it requires some focus. And the same with the workbook. I mean, the workbook ends up asking a lot of us throughout the day. I mean, there are days in the workbook where we're supposed to be practicing 5 minutes on the hour every hour. So, we did a year in Sedona in the year 2000 where we, did the workbook in the morning and the text every afternoon, and it was an amazing year, unforgettable year. I wouldn't want to say you can't do it. At the same time, I think it's probably the ideal to do one and really give it its due.
Greg or Marianne, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, I wanted to just add to go along with that ideal day. I mean, ideally, well, my ideal day is one in which I spend time with the text, and I also spend time with a lesson. So I think ideally, but I think if you're starting out especially, don't overload yourself, because you're just going to get too discouraged, and you're going to feel like it's too much. But it's great. I find it really great to start off my day with the text reading, and then to do a lesson as well.
Just a moment. I agree with Robert that it is a real challenge to do more than one at a time, and I think you want to set up a program for yourself that's doable for you, or you won't do it. You'll find a reason not to do it. And so, yeah, I think either the text or the workbook by itself is a big enough meal for you. In my experience, that's the case. I think doing both at once is possible, like Robert said, with that, the Year We Give to God thing that was done a few years ago. But that was a real challenge, and that was. I think you mentioned at one point, making T-shirts saying "I survived my 1 year I gave to God" or something like that. It's really hard. I mean, it was a lot of work, in other words. So yeah, I think one at a time is the way to go.
Okay. Well, the last question that I have, and if anyone would like to enter in any final questions in the chat, I will take them at the end. But before I ask for final thoughts from everyone, Robert, I had one more question for you. How do you recommend that people read the text? I know a lot of students just sort of pick up and decide that whatever section that they randomly select in the text that day is what they were meant to read. But do you recommend that people actually go through the text from beginning to end and read it through that way?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, yeah, see.
Sort of a layup.
Yeah, that's an easy question. I mean, once you've done that, I've done a lot of poking around, just like you're talking about. But, I'm getting away from that myself. It is written sequentially. It's not, there's a view that, and I used to have more of this view, which was anywhere you dip in, you're kind of encountering the thought system. And it's all the same throughout. But in actuality, the text is like a snowball. As it rolls forward, it gathers new things into itself. And that snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And elements that we associate with the course are introduced somewhere along that path and not earlier. So for instance, right now, I've just been writing commentary on and reading the 2 sections in chapter 19 that are the real big introduction of the concept of sin in the course. And if you're a course student, you think, well, sin's such a big concept. It must be present throughout. And it's surprising how seldom it's mentioned before these 2 sections in chapter 19. And so the whole style of the text, it's not he's just repeating himself endlessly. It's that he is going through a process in which he's introducing new ideas into the mix all the time. And if you just enter in anywhere in that process, you'll have skipped the introduction and the explanation of the very ideas that you're reading, and you'll be a bit lost.
Okay. Before we wrap, I wanted to give Greg and Marianne the opportunity to give any final thoughts related to why the text is central to the course.
I'm fine. I think I've said all that I wanted to say.
Okay. Greg? Muted. You're muted, Greg.
Yeah, I know. I muted. I was, and there has been another respite in the hammering, so I guess that's the Holy Spirit's signal for me to go. Yeah, I think to conclude, I would just say, for those of you who are about to embark on this, we're going to get a text reading thing going here. Of course, some people are already on it, I know, but it really is an amazing journey. It really is. It really can change your life, and it really is meant to be done sequentially. I mean, to kind of tie in with that question, it's kind of like you imagine going into a college course and just deciding to dip in anywhere instead of starting at the beginning and reading through the text. It's the same thing, but it is an amazing thing. It's a masterpiece. And fortunately, going through it with us, you have a lot of help, a lot of support, a lot of mighty companions. And this can be a really life-changing experience for you. I mean, it certainly has been for me. Gosh, just going through it this year for me, and I've been doing the course for 20 years, going through it this year for me has been a life-changing experience. And that's after 20 years, because we've been going through the CE, and Robert's been writing some great new commentaries, and that's been exciting. And that's after 20 years, so there's always more to discover. So anyway, it's something to look forward to, and I hope everybody has that excitement that you're about to embark on something, if you haven't started already, just really magnificent and life-changing. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say.
Robert, do you have any closing thoughts for us before I wrap up?
You know what? Those closing thoughts were so good. I want to leave it there.
Okay, great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for attending this session, this preparatory session for our Course Companions journey through the text that we're starting next month. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you will join us here next Thursday, August the 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern, where we will talk about how the text is structured. And I hope to see you then. We will use the same link. And as Greg said, this is an absolutely incredible journey. And I know I speak for Greg and Marianne and Robert when I say that we are so thrilled to be your companions on it. Thank you so much, and we will see you next Thursday at 11 a.m. Bye-bye.